Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic. Let's do it. People of Reddit, what's something that happened to you in your childhood that stayed with you your whole life? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. One time when I was small, about 5 or 6, I was hanging by a gumball machine while my parents were shopping inside a few stores at a mall. I stayed by the gumball machine because it was one of those cool ones that had a glass casing with a Rube Goldberg machine. It would scoop the gumball around and send it down slides with ramps. I still remember it vividly. It was awesome. At some point, an old man in a trench coat noticed me and bought me a gumball, just to watch my excitement and hear me laugh. He had the biggest smile on his face and pulled out a 10 roll of quarters and told me to go to town. To this day, that random act of kindness and generosity has affected me so deeply. It might have been nothing more than a passing thought and an afternoon of enjoyment for him, but honest to God, that event might be the cornerstone of my personality. When I was 6 or 7, I woke up from an especially vivid dream, certain that I could fly. I ran to my dad to tell him and got a dismissive response. I told him I would prove it and persuaded him to follow me out to the driveway. I ran, leapt, but failed to fly. I'll never forget the feelings of confusion and disappointment as I watched my dad laugh, turn around, and walk away. To this day, 40 years later, I can accurately self-assess my internal well-being based upon whether or not I've been recently taking flight in my dreams. My dad promised me pizza in exchange for work. I worked and never got the pizza. I was probably 11 or so, and the work wasn't easy. I had to load a trailer full of logs. Once, when I was like 6, I was at a family friend's house, and their kid offered me some gum. I took the gum and put it in my mouth without looking. Big mistake. Turns out, she had folded the gum and put a bug inside it. 11 years later, and I still refuse to accept gum when people offer it. Fell in a swimming pool around 3 years of age. To my recollection, I almost drowned, and it spawned a lifelong phobia of swimming in deep water. According to my dad, the only person that nearly drowned was him, as when he dove in after me, I was floating with my eyes shut and cheeks puffed out, making him laugh underwater. Our first cat, outdoor-indoor cat, never came home one day. A couple weeks later, I was talking with one of our neighbors, older couple, 70-ish, that lived 15 to 20 houses down from us, and they were talking about how they found a cat recently and took it in. I was like 8 or 9 at the time, and couldn't fully process it, so I didn't bother to ask if it was our cat, and I didn't tell my parents either. We moved to a new house a few weeks later, 40 miles away. Several years later, I realized that there was a strong chance that it was our cat. It eats me up a bit, every now and then. When I was about 8, my dad was standing in the kitchen making hot dogs for dinner. He picked up his beer, thinking it was the sauce bottle, and poured it right on his hot dog. I yelled at him to stop, but it was too late. His hot dog was smattered with beer. He put the beer down, looked at the hot dog, looked at me, and then took a ravenous bite out of the hot dog. I died laughing. He was always funny like that. An old man saw me struggling to figure out how to drink from a water fountain when I was little. He took the time to explain it to me and show me how he did it. I was so excited to finally be able to do it by myself after that. I still think of him occasionally when I use a water fountain. I got grass stains on my clothes at recess. It must have been new jeans or something, because I remember feeling bad about it when I told my mom that night, but she shrugged it off like life happens. That moment, and the idea that sometimes it's worth it to enjoy life and let material things slide, stuck with me ever since. Recently, my husband spilled red wine all over our white sheets, right after I told him to stop setting the glass down next to him on the bed like he always does, and he came out of the bedroom saying, "You're gonna kill me." I thought of that moment with my mother and told him not to feel bad about it because life happens. I was on a family vacation in Montana. The cabin we were staying in had a lot of board games. One night my dad and I were playing Battleship and I'm losing. My sister starts watching us and notices my dad move one of his ships. She tells him that he isn't allowed to do that. I get mad because he's cheating. I'm told that it's just a game and shouldn't take it so seriously. Next time we play, I don't even put my ships on the board. My dad figures out pretty quickly and gets mad because I'm cheating. and cheating is wrong. I respond, "It's just a game, and he shouldn't take it so seriously." Now I'm being a smart mouth. A day or two later, my dad asks if I want to play, and I say no, because when he cheats, it's okay because it is just a game, but when I do it, cheating is wrong. Now I'm pouting. This would get brought up from time to time, and my parents could never explain how any of that was fair. My mom had been out training for a half marathon one day and was really tired. She asked me to switch the electric blanket on full for her. It was one of those ones that went off 1, 2, 3 off. I didn't realize this and switched it right through to off again. When I asked her the next day how nice it was to get to her warm bed, she said the electric blanket wasn't on. I was heartbroken. This was 35 years ago, and it still makes me sad to think about. One weekend, I was hanging out with some girls who didn't particularly care to have me around. I'd known these girls since kindergarten, and it hadn't quite dawned on me that they didn't like me. Towards the end of the weekend, they discussed having another sleepover, and when I chimed in saying I couldn't stay over because I had gone a couple days and needed to get home, the girl who resented me the most looked at me and said, "No offense, Lemmy, but we weren't inviting you." She said it with the most disgusted and "duh, don't you get it" tone I've ever heard from anyone. Still hurts so much to think about, and this happened over 7 years ago. To this day, I'm always nervous as hell to partake in plans for fear that someone will look at me and do the same thing. No offense, Lemmy, but we aren't inviting you. Ugh. Oh man, I had something like that happen to me too when I was in 3rd grade. These same kids, all the boys in our class would have a sleepover every year, and this one kid had a really cool house. And then in 3rd grade, they sent the invitations out, and me and my buddy didn't get one. And I started to realize that certain people weren't hanging with other people. Kind of an innocence lost moment at 9 years old. So sorry that happened. Screw them, they suck. The real reason why I don't drink. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my parents had a party, and when it was done, there was a whole bunch of beer bottles around the house. I grabbed one, drank the little bit of beer in the bottom, figured beer was pretty good, went for a second bottle. The third was the one my mother was using for an ashtray. Got a nice big mouthful of cigarette ash and threw up. Now I can't even touch alcohol without it reminding me the taste of cigarette ash, and I start gagging. I wanted to play Pac-Man. I believe it was a quarter or 50 cents or something. I asked my mom for money, and she had none, but this random guy gave me money, so I played Pac-Man for the first time on an arcade system thing. It was at a pizza place. My 2nd grade teacher told me I was stupid in front of the class for doodling on my spelling test. Because of the doodles, and despite my correct spelling of all the words, she dropped my grade from an A to a C. Little did she know, my mom would take this doodle debacle to a psychiatrist and have me prescribed a long slew of medications for mental and emotional disorders I didn't have, effectively releasing the beast, which is my mother's Munchausen by proxy, which deeply affected both my sisters and myself. Thanks, Mrs. R. Smith. I hope you get warts. We live in a small village, and our doors are always open. Once a homeless man went into our house, climbed the stairs, went into my brother's room, and just fell asleep in my brother's bed. When we found him, my father told him nicely to please leave, and nothing more happened. I think about that often, and a few weeks ago, when having dinner with my family, mentioned how crazy that was. My family was kind of surprised because, as it turns out, nothing like that ever happened. I must have completely made up that episode as a kid, never talked about it to anyone, and just remembered it as if it had happened. Now I think about that story even more often. Going around the yard picking up a whole bunch of petals from different flowers and then taking them to a flat rock to smush them into purple-brown paste that I called a potion. I didn't try it, so I never found out if it would have worked. This is weird, but I was roughly about 6, 7, or 8. Me and my sister were watching Hey Arnold, the cartoon, and it was an episode where I can't remember the exact details, Arnold had learned karate. A bigger kid walked up to him, so he felt threatened and attacked him, I think. He was definitely mean to him, and the other boy ran away in tears, shouting that he was only going to ask if Arnold knew the time, or the time the next bus was at. I felt immense guilt at this. I was so sad. It was empathy towards the larger kid I felt, and it hit me so hard I had to leave the living room to go to my bedroom and cry. I have no idea why it made me feel that way or how it affected me like that, but it made me feel rotten. For ages, I kept thinking about it, and it made me upset every time. No one noticed because I didn't make it obvious, but I've thought about it so many times through my life, but never told anyone about it because it's such a weird and obscure thing to be upset about, lol. I know this isn't exactly what you meant for an answer to your question, but it was certainly an experience for me. I must have been about 5 or 6 at the time. We were visiting a seaside town, checking shops and walking along the pier. My parents buy me and my very little sister a large, fresh cookie each. I have this cookie in my hand, leaning on this huge, thick wall overlooking the water. I was getting myself situated, taking a woof, an effing seagull swooped down and stole my cookie. Like this cookie was the size of the effing seagull's head. It was the largest cookie I'd ever laid eyes on at that point in my life. I was devastated and cried so effing hard. My mom tried to comfort me, but I think they were both trying not to laugh. I get some of my sister's cookie, but it wasn't the same. From that day on, I hated all seagulls with a passion, and guarded any food from flying attackers. F seagulls. I hope you choked on it. Yeah. When I was young, probably around 8, I cleaned my room and was super proud, so I showed my mom. At this point, she had undiagnosed mental illnesses, and because I had forgotten to pick up one sock on the floor, she screamed at me until I cried. To this day, I still have difficulties cleaning things because it'll never be good enough. I was in band class and a friend was being yelled at because his string broke and he didn't have any spare. Now my violin case came with 2 extra string packets, so I offered the teacher to give one of him. He turned and yelled at me to stay out of it because it's not your business. Then he kept yelling at him till he cried, or he was already crying, I don't recall. But still, I could have helped that spare string and was willing to give it. Our families were friends, and my family was well off at the moment. It wouldn't hurt anyone. Now, I don't want to sound edgy or anything, but that moment cemented my worldview a lot. My missing time incident. I was 8 and I swear I wasn't tired. I didn't fall asleep because I remember being annoyed that my dad was making me go to bed early. I remember hearing him pray. He did that out loud, and mid-prayer the world cuts off. It's suddenly morning in the blink of an eye. A whole night passed by and I didn't move a muscle from the spot I was in. I don't remember anything between that blink. There was no time in between. I don't know what the hell happened to me, but it followed me for my entire life. Bugs me a lot sometimes. This is weird, but my parents pronounced my name differently, and it made me really confused and afraid to say my name. I still hate saying it and avoid it. I'm anxious I'll say it wrong, and I often do. I was also afraid that I'd say other people's names wrong, so often I avoided using them, which still sometimes flares up. For an idea, say my name was Carolyn, usually pronounced Carolyn. Mom would often pronounce it Sierra-Lyn or Carolyn, and Dad would call me Caroline. It's a bit more subtle in real life, so no one really noticed my confusion, but you get the idea. I finally came forward and asked my mom about it, and as an adult, she just confused me more. Claimed her pronouncing it as Sierra-Lyn was so people would get it wasn't spelled with a K, and that pronounced it differently twice in the same sentence. I guess I just need to pick a version and go with it, although it still makes me anxious and my brain starts repeating all the different pronunciations when I think about it. When I was about 9 years old, my mom and I were on holiday and stopped at a little family-run corner shop to pick up some groceries. I had a bag of potatoes for like 60p in my hand that I had forgot to hand over to the cashier, only to realize when we left the shop, my mom immediately turned around and insisted we go back to pay for the potatoes, even though they didn't cost much, and it was an honest mistake. We went back in, told the guy, who was a mixture of surprised and confused, and paid for the potatoes. Ever since, I have valued honesty and accountability significantly. I'm ridiculously truthful and feel terrible about even little white lies. It actually can be a burden, as I expect the same level of honesty back from people I trust and get upset when they don't reciprocate. I'm always reminded of that incident and believe it was one of those important life lessons. Whenever I brought it up to my mom, though, she doesn't remember it at all.